And perhaps we should be basking in an orange glow as we talk Syracuse sports. Football, basketball, you name it, it all is on this guy's platter. We haven't chatted with him in a while, so it's long overdue. Today's broadcast, by the way, brought to you by our friends at Play It Again Sports down there on Erie Boulevard in DeWitt. Go see our friends at Play It Again. Right now, you can get some cheap skis, some cool snowboarding gear, whatever is on your winter sports mind. Go see our friends at Play It Again. All right, let's bring in one of our SU insiders. It's the one, it's the only, Mr. Mike McAllister. How are you, Michael? What's up?
I'm doing well. You guys are pretty legit with that intro and all the graphics. I mean, that's some grade A type stuff right there.
Listen, man, our digital world is starting to come together. You know, after
Really
30-ish years in radio, we're starting to figure out this digital thing as well. So thanks for the compliment, Mike. Appreciate that. Well, I'd like to say, we're in the off season and everything's just calm as can be. But when it comes to Syracuse football, there is absolutely positively a firestorm of things going on. So let's just pick them off one at a time. I'm going to go to one of the most recent, and that is Calvin Russell, the big 5-star wide receiver that everybody's been talking about. Today was signing day, and Calvin said, not quite ready yet to put that pen to paper. And this obviously is a big, big concern for Syracuse football. So, Mike, what can you tell us about what's going on with Calvin Russell?
Yeah, this is crazy. Now, first of all, before I get into that, just to give everyone a fair warning, there is a possibility at some point that my dog is going to decide to jump on the couch and end up behind me. So if you see him back there, just...
Oh, that would be entertaining.
Yeah, sure, quite.
So as far as Calvin Russell goes, we had heard nothing going into today that would indicate anything other than he was going to sign with Syracuse. And in fact, there had been reports out, I think, a few weeks ago that he said, I'm 100% locked in with Syracuse. I'm all good. That's where I'm signing. And then there was an Instagram Live today during Miami Northwestern High School's National Signing Day ceremony, which he and several of his teammates were going through that process. And when it was his turn to speak, he said, I'm not signing today. And then at one point he held up the U for the Miami symbol, which had some Syracuse fans a little upset with that. And apparently some overheard, I didn't personally overhear this, but I saw this discussed, that he had mentioned LSU and Florida and Miami as 3 schools that had reached out to him as recently as last night to try to change his mind. Now, what's interesting about this is right after he announced that he wasn't signing today, there were recruiting analysts from multiple media outlets that said Michigan and Miami were involved. And then shortly after that, the Miami site on our network, 24/7 Sports, put out a report that said they are not expecting Miami to be involved. And then I spoke with a couple of people that I trust that said that they don't believe that Michigan is going to be involved either. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. If it's Miami and Michigan that were involved in addition to Syracuse, neither of them want him. That still leaves the one school. So what are we doing here? But then it sounds like that LSU and Florida could potentially be involved here as well. They obviously just had coaching changes. So they're kind of, scrambling right before signing day to try to, right before the early signing period, to try to see what they can do on the recruiting trail. And obviously, if you can flip a 5-star wide receiver, that's a pretty big splash to have in your first week on the job. So those are things to kind of keep an eye on right now. We don't have a definitive word on, which way, if any, he's leaning. His agent put out a statement a short while ago that said something to the effect of, Calvin Russell loves Fran Brown and Syracuse football, but he just wants to pray about it and make sure that his decision is 100% and that he'll be signing sometime before end of day Friday. So we are currently in constant Calvin Russell waiting mode at this juncture of where things stand.
All right, Mike, I have to, from the Syracuse fan perspective, I have to ask this question. These two are about to get married. Okay, here we go. As far as I know, today we're about to put a ring on it and make it official. And then for one of the parts of that party to go, I'm not saying no, but not saying yes. For Syracuse fans, this feels devastating. This feels like the breakup has happened, but you've said that the door is still open. Is there any chance that this could just be a quick cold feet? You go outside, you breathe a little, and Friday, all is well, and Calvin Russell just returns to Syracuse as promised, and Syracuse fans don't lose their mind? or is this just a very strong indication that greater powers that may be, other fish in other waters with very deep pockets, are going to break Syracuse's heart and steal this young man from our arms?
All of those things are possible.
Okay, great.
It is certainly possible that by the end of the day Friday he is signed with Syracuse. It is also possible that by the end of the day Friday he has broken Syracuse fans' hearts. This is recruiting. Nothing is impossible. Nothing is out of the realm of possibility. We just saw within the last couple of days that Syracuse football got a commitment from a platinum rapper, which was not on my bingo card for this recruiting cycle. So nothing is impossible. I'm also old enough to remember last recruiting cycle, the 2025 class, when Demetrius Samuel committed to Syracuse early, then flipped his commitment to an SEC school, and then ended up flipping back and signing with Syracuse. So these ebbs and flows of recruiting, I understand why perhaps Syracuse fans aren't used to this, because it hasn't really been something they've had to deal with in past recruiting cycles, because you weren't swimming in these waters with the elite prospects that everybody wants. And the reality is, if you go look at the history of Alabama recruiting, Georgia recruiting, Michigan recruiting, Notre Dame recruiting, they have all dealt with situations like this because they are constantly swimming in these waters, and this stuff happens. There was a recruit years ago that he wanted to go to one school, and his mom wanted him to go to another school. He ends up signing with the school that he wanted to go to, or was going to, and his mom stood up in the middle of the ceremony, grabbed the NLI, the National Letter of Intent papers, and walked away. And that was a whole drama of him trying, because of his age, he needed her to sign it, because you need a guardian if you're under 18, I believe, to sign the papers. And so there was drama that went on for a couple of days with him trying to get her to sign where he wanted to go, but she wanted him to go to a different school. So that type of stuff happens when you're dealing with these elite level recruits. And so as much fun, or whatever word you want to use this is, as long as you've got Fran Brown, as long as Fran Brown continues to be after these high level recruits, you're probably going to have drama like this every single recruiting cycle for the foreseeable future.
Mike, I might use a different F word to describe this recruiting thing you just talked about, but perhaps that's for a different day. Mike, the question is just, how do you do it, man? How do you do this for a living with, no, they're in, no, they're out, okay, they're in, but it could be, how do you do your job, man?
Well, I think it starts with loving recruiting. And before I even got into this, I always loved to follow recruiting. I followed it, when I was growing up here, and I would always read the newspaper about the new basketball or football players that were coming to Syracuse. I remember, I don't know why this memory sticks in my brain, but I remember reading a story from the Post-Standard, the paper that we would get every day, and reading about the incoming freshmen for Syracuse basketball. One of them, their name was Hakeem Warwick. And I remember looking at it, knowing absolutely nothing about who this player was, and saying, his name is Hakeem Warwick. That is an awesome name. He's going to be really good. I don't know why. I just think because of that name, he's going to be really good. Turns out he was pretty good. So that, I think, kind of started it, where I just got into, following the recruiting process and who's after these kids and all that type of stuff. And I think in order to handle it from a job perspective, it's just one of those things that you have to kind of expect. It's a little bit different this year in dealing with a 5-star wide receiver that, potentially LSU and Florida and Michigan and Miami are all trying to get to flip from Syracuse, as opposed to years past where you're like, is Syracuse going to flip that Akron running back commit? That's it's a little bit different. There's more drama. There's more national spotlight on it. That doesn't make the bottom line of ESPN if Syracuse flips an Akron running back commit, whereas a 5-star wide receiver, whether or not he's going to end up sticking with Syracuse or going somewhere else, that's going to be headline news everywhere. So it's kind of one of those things that you deal with, and if you love recruiting, that that comes with it, and it's just part of the deal. The side note for all of this is I did see a couple of comments from some Syracuse fans saying Fran Brown is hurting Syracuse again because of the Calvin Russell situation. And I said, you realize the only reason they're in the discussion in the first place is because of Fran Brown. And the reason that they signed 4 or 5 4-star prospects outside of Calvin Russell is because of Fran Brown. So that comment was a little bit lost on me. I think people are probably a little jaded from the 8-game losing streak, but even still, it all comes with the nature of recruiting.
Fascinating to me, Mike, that you go back to Hakeem Warwick when you talk about your passion for recruiting. And by the way, I'm glad we have guys like you so that I don't have to follow it like you do, because I can't take the ebb and flow and the drama and the soap operas that go along with these 17 and 18-year-olds making decisions about the rest of their lives, or at least the next few years of their lives. But that's so funny, because one of the few recruiting stories that I actually went out on when I was a TV reporter and anchor at Channel 9 TV right here in Syracuse was when Julius Hodge turned down Syracuse and ended up going to NC State. And this kid named Hakeem Warwick became the guy that Jim Boeheim was going to replace him with. Well, just like you, Mike, we didn't know who Warwick was. So they sent me down to Philadelphia with a photographer, and we did a day in the life with Hakeem Warwick. I went as mother. We had dinner with them, or lunch with them in their kitchen. It was really nice. We went to a basketball practice, a high school basketball practice of his, and watched him at practice, and then came back with, did some live reports and came back with a full piece on Hakeem Warwick. So one of the few recruiting stories I've actually followed up on is Hakeem Warwick. It's just so ironic that that's what got you started. All right, that aside, let's talk about the rapper Tuzi. I mean, what? He's 25 years old, and now he wants to play football. Is he even a good football player, Mike? What can you tell us? We know he can rap. The guy's won awards, but can he play? Tell us about it.
So the last time he played organized football, I believe, was either in 2017 or 2018. He graduated in 2018, which would mean the 2017 season would have been the last time that he played organized football at the high school level. So he's, 7-8 years. At least it wasn't 6-7, so I don't have to deal with that. But 7-8 years ago was the last time he played, organized football that you could, I guess, say we can watch and sort of see some things. But listen, he had some good speed. I think he ran at the time in the 4.6s, something like that. He's not, one of these 6'3", 6'4" type of guys. He's, I think, listed at 5'8". I think when he was in high school, he was 140 pounds. He obviously looks a lot bigger than that right now. So you have to figure he's put on some decent amount of muscle to that frame. But it's hard to say exactly how good of a football player he is right now. Now, he just announced, I believe in August, was when he said, I want to pursue college football and I'm going to pause my music career in order to go after that. And he got an offer from Sacramento State. He had Duke and North Carolina State have him on campus for visits. And then obviously he visited Syracuse and ends up committing. But I don't think all of those schools are going to be expressing interest if they saw absolutely nothing there. So at the end of the day, if you believe in Fran Brown and you believe in his ability to attract talent and his and the staff's ability to evaluate talent, then you trust their judgment on this. Might it end up producing nothing and he's just sort of on the back end of the roster and just takes up a spot and that's it? We don't really see him on the field that much. That's possible. It's also possible that maybe he finds a way to contribute in some way as either a backup reserve wide receiver, a special teams guy. We'll see, but at least he has playing in his history, the fact that he played at the high school level. This isn't just something he's throwing out there out of nowhere. And he has been training for it for the last 4 months. It's still probably going to take some time once he gets up here to get acclimated to learning a playbook and understanding your specific assignments and memorizing plays and all of that type of stuff. There's going to be an adjustment, no doubt. But if he legitimately is as serious about this as he appears, I think he'll put in the necessary work in order to get himself as prepared as possible.
Well, maybe
Mike,
Syracuse could have a banger of an entrance song with this guy in the fold. I mean, let's have at it. Go ahead, BG.
Yeah, no, just a quick follow-up here on this situation. I don't know if we have this information, Mike. Would he be a walk-on? Would he be someone that's offered a scholarship? Obviously, I would imagine, I don't like speaking on other men's money, but multi-platinum, I imagine that's not an issue for Tuzi coming in here.
Yeah, money is not an object here, I don't believe. But that said, if he is given the opportunity to take a scholarship, I mean, I'd rather not spend $100 and something thousand a year if I don't have to, regardless of how much I have in my bank. But I haven't heard specifically either way, whether he's on scholarship or whether he's considered a walk-on. But the thing I'll say is with the way that the scholarship limits are structured now, in that you have 105 players available to you, spots available to you. It doesn't matter whether they're on scholarship or not. You have 105 spots, period. It's not like you have 90 spots and then you have 15 that can be allocated to walk-ons. So just from a roster management standpoint, it's not like he's taking a spot away from someone specifically. Like, well, you could have made him a walk-on and then given that scholarship to someone else. That's not necessarily the case here. He is taking up a roster spot, but not stealing a scholarship from someone else, so to speak.
Well, Mike, another soap opera recruit, Terrell Grant. Tell us about what's going on with Terrell Grant, another soap opera story here.
Yeah, so he was committed to Syracuse since June, took official visits to a few schools, committed to Syracuse as an athlete, plays multiple positions at the high school level, including quarterback. But Syracuse was recruiting him to be a defensive back, and he was all excited about learning to play DB under Fran Brown, committed to Syracuse in June, had been committed since, and everything up until about a couple of weeks ago seemed all good. And then James Franklin was hired by Virginia Tech, and he decided he wanted to try to lock in some in-state prospects. And one of those that he targeted was Terrell Grant. And Grant took an official visit there this past weekend. And there were rumors that a flip was a strong possibility, that he was going to change his commitment from Syracuse to Virginia Tech. And then Syracuse continued to work on it behind the scenes. They were able to reaffirm his commitment. And he put out a post on Monday that said, I'm 1,000% locked in. Let's get to work. Can't wait to be up at Syracuse. Something along those lines. So everything seemed to be all good, was that Syracuse was able to hold off James Franklin of Virginia Tech. And then I got a call last night from a source of mine that said it's not a done deal yet, that Virginia Tech's still pushing. They haven't stopped just because he said he's 1,000% locked in. Fast forward to today, and it seemed like it was leaning towards Virginia Tech. And then ultimately, a little while ago, I think about an hour or so before this recording, he was officially announced by Virginia Tech football as signing with the Hokies. So I guess the 1,000% committed, 1,000% locked in changed to 0% locked in, at least from a Syracuse perspective. And now he's signed with Virginia Tech. Should be noted too, he's from Virginia, so he's staying in state. And that's why Virginia Tech took a special interest in him.
Right. We're going to continue talking recruiting with you, Mike. When we get back from this quick break, I want to talk to you about the changes in the coaching carousel and the timing of this. Obviously, that Lane Kiffin story has really, really kind of blown that up in a big way, and I want to get your take on that. So simmer on that for a second while we just take 30 seconds, hear a little bit more from our friends at Play It Again Sports.
When you don't want to pay full price for sporting goods, and who does, then there's only one place to go in Syracuse. Play It Again Sports. With both new and gently used gear, Play It Again has prices way less than regular retail stores. Another unique aspect of this awesome sporting goods store is that they will give you money for that quality sports gear collecting dust in your basement, attic, or garage. No appointment necessary, just bring it into the store. Play It Again Sports in the DeWitt Town Center on Erie Boulevard right next to Crunch Fitness. Don't spend more, play it again. PlayItAgainSportsSyracuse.com.
All right, we are back with Mike McAllister, publisher of At Syracuse on 24 on the At 24/7 Sports Network. Mike, let's talk some more Syracuse football, and we'll even get into some basketball by the time this is all said and done. But a more general question that I teased right there going into the commercial, and that is this. This whole situation with Lane Kiffin has really brought out something that's existed, but brought it out in a much larger way. Here you have a guy who's the head coach at Ole Miss. They're a contender this year. They're going to be in the playoff. They're jostling for seeding. And now in the middle of all this, some teams are done and they're looking for coaches. And LSU is one of those teams out there looking for a future coach. And so this whole drama begins. And as it turns out, of course, he's leaving and heading to LSU. And his team is kind of, dare I say, to use my last name, left in the lurch. Okay, with weird situation, and now one of the assistant coaches I just heard earlier today is going to come back and help out, even though he's on Lane Kiffin's staff at LSU. But they didn't want Kiffin to stay and coach the team because of the bad blood. I don't know, or he's already got one foot out the door. We don't want him here coaching our team. Talk to me about this. And does college football need to do something about this? Because I really think they do. Give me your thoughts on that.
I think they do. I'm just not exactly sure what it would be that they could do. other than make it a little bit more binding, make it more difficult for a coach to leave, or perhaps you decide, just like you have a window for player movement, maybe you have a window for coach movement, meaning you can't fire a coach mid-season if you decide that this is what you're going to do, because it has to be both ways. You can't just say coaches can't leave on their own volition at any point other than this window, but also programs or schools can fire a coach at any point if they want, because it's not equitable on both sides. So if you're going to do it that way, if the NCAA was going to legislate some sort of window where coaches could depart for another spot or anything like that, you would have to make it so that schools also could not fire them before that window, or at least before a season concludes. So you'd have to do it from both sides. And I can't see schools agreeing to this because they want the ability to fire a coach mid-season when things are going off the rails, right? So think about, if Syracuse is 3-9 this year. What if Syracuse goes 3-9 3 seasons in a row, and in the midst of the fourth one, they're 1-5? Syracuse is going to go, all right, we need to make a move now so that we are alerting everyone to the fact that this job is open. I don't think that's going to happen, but just as an example, right? And if you were to try to legislate something here, you might take that power away. And I don't think the schools are going to want to do that. Now, could you have something built into contracts that say if your team is in a playoff spot or competing for a playoff spot, then you can't do this? You could.
Right. You know how that the NFL has that rule for teams, talking to assistant coaches when teams are in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I'm thinking
Head coaches and stuff like that too. Yeah.
And this is just crazy. This is madness. What's going on? The unfairness of what's happening with Ole Miss is just, to me, a crime to college football. It could very, very vastly impact the playoff, and I don't like that.
It could, yeah. And here's the thing too, right? So why do coaches oftentimes leave? One, they're in a bad situation where they're not happy. That could be one. But most of the time, it's because they're looking for a promotion, so to speak, right? They're looking to go to a better spot where they have a better chance to compete at a higher level. You want to get to the playoff and compete for a national championship. You're literally doing that right now. So, that's the part that's frustrating. And then the other part is, if you're someone who is a player or a family member of a player at Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's been there for several years. When he was recruiting you as a transfer portal guy or high school guy, he's telling you, you come here, we're going to compete at a high level, compete for national championships and get to the playoff, and you're going to help get us there. And, all this stuff about the relationship and how you fit with us, and I care about you and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, by the way, I am now abandoning you right when we get to that goal. I don't like it. I think it speaks to character of someone that would do something like that. Not to bash Lane necessarily for that, because I don't have all the information that he does, so it is unfair in some respects. But it doesn't look good from 1,000 miles away, which is where I am. And yeah, I wish there was something in place that would prevent that from happening. But it kind of is what it is in the way the landscape is right now. And ironically, if rumors are true that LSU is one of the schools trying to get Calvin Russell, that whole situation, as much as everyone was watching it entertainment-wise from Syracuse, doesn't affect us. It's the SEC nonsense. Could end up directly affecting you if he's able to pluck Calvin Russell. And the other interesting thing about that is, even though he had an Ole Miss offer, Ole Miss wasn't actively recruiting him, going after him real hard when he committed to Syracuse, when he had been committed to Syracuse. All of a sudden he gets a new job, and it's, let me go see if I can flip this kid last minute.
Yeah.
Those last minute, I'm always surprised that recruits don't see through.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And the big word we talk about here is loyalty, which brings us back to Syracuse. Fran Brown, when asked about his coaches and things throughout the season, is like, loyalty. Now all of a sudden, whoa, loyalty. I don't know about that. And now all of a sudden, some changes have been made on the coaching staff. I'll toss the reins over to you, Mike. You can tell us who's gone and if there are more moves to come here. Is this it? Is this enough of the ritual bloodletting, or are more people got to keep their head on a swivel for what could be happening here on the Syracuse football coaching staff? Because there's been a lot of changes, Mike.
There have been. I would guess that this is probably a vast majority of them. Like, I don't see 3 or 4 more moves coming. Is there the possibility that there could be another one? Sure. I think anytime you have position changes or job title changes mid-season, as we saw with Mike Johnson and Nunzio Campanelli, I always look at those and say, are they going to – not that Syracuse is going to say, we don't want you anymore, because I think if that was the case, we would have already seen that. But more so, could they decide they want to look for another opportunity because they don't like the fact that their job title changed mid-season? That I could see. So I don't have any direct intel one way or the other, but those are just things that I generally keep an eye on with the way that they play out. As far as who's left, special teams coordinator Ricky Brumfield was one of the ones that was let go. I was a little bit surprised by that just because I thought special teams was a lot better than what it was the year before. But what we don't know is there could have been some internal conflict, philosophical things that, he and Fran butted heads on. Don't know, but either way, he's gone. Defensive back coach Joe Schaefer, who was also here during the 2024 season, he's gone. We know the backs were a little bit up and down this year, but again, the lack of pass rush, I think, kind of was a part of that. Offensive line coach Dale Williams, he was let go. We know the offensive line was not great this year. They dealt with some injuries, but even when they weren't, they really struggled, especially running the football, couldn't open holes consistently. Of course, having a quarterback that can complete a pass would certainly help with the run game a little bit, but either way. And then linebackers coach Robert Wright, who was also with Syracuse during the 2024 season, he is gone. So a lot of changes, mainly 2 of them on the defensive side of the ball, one of them on the offensive side of the ball, and one of them at special teams. So kind of equal opportunity coaching changes all around, and you're going to see a drastically different staff when Syracuse takes the field in 2026. And interestingly, at his press conference today, Fran Brown was asked, what are you looking for in potential new coaches, specifically at defensive coordinator, because in addition to that, Elijah Robinson had his title change from defensive coordinator to co-defensive coordinator and defensive line coach, which was a bit of a demotion. He's no longer going to be having play calling responsibilities. So who are they looking for as, what types of things are they looking for as someone that can come in and take over play calling duties and game planning, et cetera? And he said, I want to tackle the guy with the football better and keep them from getting in the end zone as much. That would seem to be the point of defense. So
yes,
2 big keys. Yeah.
Right. But didn't offer a lot of specifics beyond that. Or, are they going to look for a change scheme-wise? Could they go to a different base? Could they go to a 3-3-5 like they ran when Tony White was here? We don't know. Stuff to keep an eye on, but there's certainly a lot of changes with that Syracuse coaching staff.
All right. Last one on football, and I don't want to swing over and get a little basketball knowledge from you as well, Mike. But the only thing that people really care during this offseason when it comes to Syracuse football is the quarterback situation. So the thought here is that Steve Angeli is going to return. There's no reason to think that's not the case, but I'd love to get your take on that. And then beyond that, I think Fran Brown learned his lesson that you got to have somebody behind your starting quarterback if you're going to have a relatively successful season and not let that thing spiral the way it did this year. So who might be that guy? Is it going to be a portal guy? Is it somebody in this recruiting class? Tell me a little bit about what the future of the quarterback situation looks like at Syracuse as we speak.
Yeah, now in Fran Brown's defense, as far as the quarterback position this year, I think if you had, before the season, had said your starting quarterback is a guy who's coming from Notre Dame, former highly touted recruit that had a little bit of experience and played well in that experience. Your backup is going to be a former 4-star highly touted recruit that was at LSU behind an established starter and was looking for a better opportunity for playing time. Those are your 1 and your 2. You'd say, okay, we feel like our starter's got some potential, and if for some reason he doesn't work out or he gets injured, we have a viable option at number 2 as well. That on paper is kind of what you're looking for. It just didn't happen to work out. Ricky Collins just wasn't what they had hoped or what they thought he could be. And then once you decided to move on from him, you had a bunch of inexperienced freshmen. And that just kind of is what it is. So given what we've seen this past season and how it went, especially once they got rid of, once they stopped going to Ricky and it just kept getting worse, is relying on true freshmen is really difficult. Unless you have a very special elite level type of player. I know Pitt did that when they made their quarterback change. They went to a true freshman and that worked out. That's not normal. That's uncommon. Or you have a 5-star, just elite level stud that's going to come in and change your program, right? Dylan Raiola at Nebraska started right away as a true freshman. But even he had his shares of ups and downs and has for the past couple of seasons. So I don't think that's the option that they're going to go with. They do have a quarterback. His name is Zaid Lott, who's coming in, who they really like and they think has a ton of potential. That they think he's a great athlete with a really strong arm and that the ceiling on him is extremely high. That said, Fran Brown has also indicated that they're going to go after 2 transfer portal quarterbacks to try to shore up that position to be behind Steve Angeli. Now, what types of players could they go after there? It's difficult to find someone that is a really good quarterback that can start and win games for you that everybody wants and is more of a sure thing without as much risk because Steve Angeli is there, and generally those types are going to want to go somewhere where they have a better opportunity for playing time. That's part of why they're leaving. So I think most likely you find someone similar to a Steve Angeli that was kind of behind other people, isn't going to win the starting job, has a little bit of experience, and is just looking for a better place where they have an opportunity to potentially play. And if you can convince one of those guys that maybe you start early in the year because Angeli isn't quite ready rehabbing from his injury, but we saw him get injured the year before, so you're one play away from going in. And if they can buy into that, that's perhaps a guy you could get. Or similar to a Ricky Collins, someone who is a former highly touted recruit who hasn't played a ton and is looking for a better opportunity because they're buried on their current depth chart. The last type of guy you can get is someone at a lower level that's maybe an FCS D2 or D3 guy that has a lot of playing experience and is just looking to try to get onto a Power 4 roster for his last year or two and is looking at Syracuse as a potential option there. So I would guess that those are the types of guys that they're going to end up getting. Probably one that has starting experience but is from a lower level, and then another who doesn't have a ton, is a former highly regarded recruit, and is stuck behind some established guys at his current school.
Mike, one last one on football, and then we'll let Lurch get all his basketball action in there with you. And it's this. When Dino Babers was here, that 10-win season was awesome, and I will remember it, and so will many Syracuse fans locally forever. But it was that season and then a lot of nothing. We have it here with Fran Brown, where we got a super awesome season last year with Kyle McCord and everybody. Rondé Gadsden was sweet, and this year it sucked. Was last year a fluke, or is Fran Brown, in your opinion, with everything you know about the recruiting and the roster construction, is he going to bounce back and get us closer to that direction? That's a hard ask because it was a really great year, but close us in that direction versus the mediocrity it was beyond just that 1 year with Dino.
Here are the reasons why I think it's different than the Dino situation. Okay. One, he had the 10-win season in year 1. I think Dino had it in year 2 or 3.
Yeah, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, 3.
Right. So Dino went through 2 poor years before he got to that really good year.
Okay.
Fran had his right away. Now, the transfer portal is part of that because that wasn't as much of a thing when Dino came. But at the same time, this year started out really well. They looked like they were going to have another really good season the first 4 games until their starting quarterback got hurt. Now, the similarities is that you could say Syracuse had a bunch of seasons where they started out well, and then their starting quarterback got hurt under Dino, Garrett Schrader multiple times, and then seasons fell off. But the way that Fran Brown is able to recruit and attract high-end talent and has improved the quality of athlete that's coming to Syracuse is a lot different than what it was under Dino Babers. What we saw under Dino Babers is he had a couple of years without tons of injury issues where it didn't go well. He had a year where everyone stayed healthy again and it went very well. And then he had some other years where, again, sometimes there were injury issues, sometimes there were not. They won 1 game when Tommy DeVito was a quarterback all year, I think the COVID year. So we saw mixed bags from him in both areas. With Fran, we've seen that as long as he's had his starting quarterback, they've been really good. And I think this is a year that if Angeli is healthy the entire season, they might win 7 or 8 games. They certainly would have had a shot to. I think they would have been bowl eligible at minimum. Of course, then with as many job openings as there were, perhaps Fran wouldn't be here anymore. There would have been other schools coming calling and trying to poach him away. So maybe a little blessing in disguise. But I've never seen recruiting like this at Syracuse as long as I've been covering it. And I think that is why this is different as much as anything. You know, you have a borderline top 25 recruiting class, assuming Calvin Russell stays. Even without him, you still have the highest ranked recruiting class you would have had in 20 plus years. You're not getting multiple 4-star players from Florida that a bunch of other schools really want while you're going 3-9 if something isn't different. And so we also have to remember this is just year 2 of Fran Brown. He's still growing as a head coach. He's learning. Players or coaches get better too, right? They don't just stay exactly who they were. They learn, they get better. I've seen different things. You know, I know we're switching to basketball from Adrian Autry than what I saw in years past with him in terms of his approach to things, how he manages the game and things like that. So coaches get better as they learn and as they get more experience. And I think all of that has to be considered with Fran Brown as well. He was not a head coach before he came. Dino Babers had been a head coach for several years before he came. That's another key difference.
Yeah, I am a big fan of continuity and patience, and I think far too often we don't have any, and what could have turned into a really good coach or a really good player just gets swept under the rug because we're just too impulsive, and we don't understand there's a developmental period, and that includes coaches. You know, Adrian Autry, has never been a head coach anywhere before Syracuse. It's a different role, and there's a lot of adapting to be done there, and there's a lot of stuff going on off of the floor that complicates that just as much. So let's talk a little basketball, Mike. We'll do an in-depther on basketball with you maybe after the new year, and we all get through the holidays. I'd love to do that with you. But let's just touch the tip of the iceberg here. Syracuse obviously has started their season. They were just out in Las Vegas. It didn't go well record-wise. They went 0-3 against all ranked teams. In the first 2 games, they were very, very game, though. The third game I didn't like so much. They kind of got the doors blown off them. Then they come back home and they beat Tennessee. So a ranked team is now a skin on the wall, essentially, for Adrian Autry. I am very, very impressed with a few players, particularly some of the youngins, and in particular, Carmelo Anthony's son. I did not expect a ton out of him this year. I know the name has got everybody going Google Gaga, but I wasn't so sure how important a player he would be to Syracuse. And while he's coming off the bench, I'm very impressed with him. I'm also impressed with Sadiq White. So just give us a little quickie on those 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing so kind of high level, right? They've these last 4 games they've played for the best teams in college basketball, right? Basically all top 20, top 15 caliber teams. And for 7 of 8 halves, they've been right there, shown that they belong on the same court with those teams. And if they shot free throws better, Kansas is probably a 5 or fewer point loss. They beat Houston, and they're sitting here at 6-2 with those 2. It's really that 1 half against Iowa State that kind of skews everything.
Right.
But to your point, key in that run, because you haven't had Donnie Freeman, is the fact that Sadiq White has come in and stepped in and been the starter. And I thought he played exceptionally well against Tennessee, especially. He's getting more comfortable. He's a better outside shooter than what I thought. He's not taking 4 or 5 threes a game, but he's certainly capable. And when he's left wide open, he's proven that he can make that shot. But he just plays with energy. He's very mature on the defensive end is what I've noticed from him, is that oftentimes when you have guys that are just freakishly athletic and they can block shots, sometimes they play out of control and they just try to block everything. And he doesn't play that way. He's good as far as how selective he is with help defense, rotating off his guy to block someone on the backside. He's really good in the post, even though he doesn't look like he's the thickest guy in the world. But Tennessee has some big bruisers in their front court, and he physically played with them. There was a couple of plays in particular where I think he was guarding Brown, and Brown was trying to post up on him, and Sadiq White wasn't giving him an inch, and it wasn't called, but I saw Brown at one point just two-hand shove him to get him off of him so that he could try to get some space.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was frustrating him, Brown thought that he should be able to physically bully Sadiq White, and White didn't let it happen. That speaks to his toughness, how hard he's working in the weight room to gain that strength. And he can get a little bit bigger while he continues with that athleticism and that bounciness. I mean, he's got just limitless potential. He's really fun to watch. And then Kyan Anthony, he struggled the last 4 games as far as his shooting efficiency, but he showed early on when J.J. Starling was out, he's more than capable of playing with the ball in his hands.
Yep.
Handled the ball a little bit better than I thought, giving them a better effort on the defensive end as well. So the biggest thing for him is becoming not a ball sticker where the ball gets to him and then the offense becomes stagnant as they watch him go ISO. If he can continue to develop that area of his game, which I thought he was better against Tennessee, again, he's just so smooth offensively. You can see some elements of his father's teaching in his game.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's not his dad, obviously, and he shouldn't be compared, and yet it's going to happen anyway because of the last name. But the fact of the matter is, he comes across to me in watching him here in his early evolution in college as a player who is the son of a player or the son of a coach. He's just there's a sinewiness to his game. He kind of angles himself. Dare I say, I hate to compare him to a really great player, but there's a little Jalen Brunson in him. Dare I say, like there's some things, some nuances in his game where you're like, not every player would think of that. It seems like he has options and that he's worked on his game in a lot of ways. Now he needs to put on some weight and do some other things that I think will make him a much better player if he hangs around in college for a bit. But I like some of that moxie, and I think you were kind of, hinting at it there about his dad and his dad's influence on his game.
I think anytime you grow up around the game as he has, that your basketball IQ, for example, for him is through the roof, and that helps him. There's some more maturation and understanding of things like the angles of where you are versus where your defender is. Even something as simple as there was a play against Tennessee. He kind of caught the ball on the elbow, but at the 3-point line, and made just a really simple little bounce pass to the baseline to Sadiq White, who turned that into a bucket. Just little plays like that where understanding where White is, where the defense is, and then the type of pass that's needed in that situation. The bounce pass set up Sadiq White better to take the ball to the rim than a chest pass would have.
Right.
Little things like that you understand from growing up around the game and not just working on your own game and working with your dad, who's going to be a Hall of Famer, but just watching and observing when you're in Madison Square Garden every night, watching your father play, and not just watching him, but watching everybody, right? So he's a 2-guard. Carmelo's a small forward. Yeah, there's some similarities there playing on the wing, but there's also some subtle differences. Kyan is going to be asked to handle the ball more so as far as running a half-court offense than what Carmelo was asked to do. When you see these high-level players doing those things night in, night out, it helps you as you develop your own game.
All right, very cool, Mike. Like I said, we'll go a nice in depth. We'll do a nice in depth with you on hoops, maybe after the holidays, and we get into the throes of ACC season. I think it's going to be a very interesting league season for Syracuse, and maybe they can get themselves back into that top half of the league, if not the top third of the league, if some of these players develop as they are. And they're getting a great experience here playing some of these really, really good teams. I know losses stink, and nobody wants to see Syracuse. It's like same old, same old. They can't beat the good teams. But I think there were some signs, I hate to be the old horseshoes and hand grenades guy, but I think there are some signs actually that this team is better and that Adrian Autry is becoming a better coach. So hopefully it will turn into wins come ACC season. We shall see. But I do think that there, to me, is a light at the end of this tunnel there, I might say.
From just a roster construction standpoint, you can see the differences in terms of how they put this roster together compared to prior years. And then sorry, my voice is like deciding it wants to go away.
No, I know. Syracuse basketball gets Mike very emotional, which I can understand. It means a lot to you. Yeah.
But then just how intense they play on the defensive end of the floor.
Yeah.
We didn't see anything close to that last year. They were awful defensively. And so the fact that he got the right guys and the right type of guys and how long they are at every single position, you can see that this roster is built more so in what Adrian Autry's image is and what he wants his team to be. And they're playing like that. I think the coaches are coaching that as well. You can see how engaged the entire coaching staff and the entire bench is throughout every single game, how much more animated Adrian Autry is on the sideline. He was kind of just hanging out there, it seemed like, most of last year. And this year, he's into every single game. He's up, he's shouting out orders, and it's a totally different, basically everything from what we saw last year. And I think part of that is growth on Adrian Autry's part. Part of that is also this team and what they need from him, but also how he's built the team. I think it shows a lot of growth in the way that he approaches everything from roster construction to game management.
All right. We see if it will equate to wins. That's why we have you on, Mike. All the great knowledge being spilled here. Check him out. Follow him up at Syracuse on 24/7. It's our good pal, Mike McAllister. Mike, thanks for spending some time. We appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.